there in internet and YouTube land. I'm the Jazz and Blues audiophile. It's the month of April. It's mid-April as I'm recording this, and I want to talk to you about this gentleman playing in the background. I'm talking about none other than the one and only Count Basie. You're into jazz. Have you never heard of the great Count Basie? Oh, shame on you, man. Shame on you. Basie is truly one of the great big bands to come out of the swing era. And he launched the career of so many great legendary jazzmen of the mainstream style that I don't know if we can count all of them that were definitely encouraged by the Basie Band in their careers, I want to say. So Basie, just to name a few: Lester Young, Erskine Heavens, Buck Clayton, Harry Sweets Edison. All these guys came through the Basie ranks in the beginning, and Basie helped launch their career, helped propel them to the forefront as soloists and make them known to the public, because Basie was one heck of a swing band. And the thing about Count Basie is he's become a reference. I mean, I would say that the Count Basie Orchestra is the reference for big band swing. It's the reference if you want to know how a unit should sound ideally. An effortless swinging style that just seems like it's coming completely naturally. All these 16 musicians playing as one. A great unison sound. A sound like no other. The Count Basie sound. And everybody was jealous of that Count Basie swing and that Count Basie sound, that all these 16 men playing as one individual. And so it became sort of a reference big band for just about everybody that was doing jazz, that was doing big band jazz anyway, especially in the 30s and 40s, during the big band era, but even afterwards. Because the great thing about Count Basie is his career kept right on going, right until the end. He was born in 1904 in Red Bank, New Jersey. That's why they used to nickname him, call him the Kid from Red Bank. And his instrument, of course, the piano, a very personal and very unique style of the piano, very sparse on the notes, but just phenomenally rhythmic and a great inspirer. And how should I say, Basie just twinkled a little bit at the piano and you felt inspired. You know, he just hit 2 or 3 notes and the musicians just wanted to, let's go, let's belt it out. You know, he had this very special, unique characteristic about him. Just a very happy, I'd say, this man, happy man, a man that projected a certain kind of happiness, and his band projected this kind of ease of swing and just easy-going life. You know, just listen to his sound. It's just, you listen to that and you say, man, life is beautiful. Life is beautiful. Listen to that easy swinging sound. 16 men swinging and just digging life. Saying, isn't life beautiful? What a sound. That's the Basie sound. This is their album, April in Paris. Of course, the title track you just heard, the title track, this is not from this album, what's playing right now. What's playing right now is from a live performance in Germany in 1969, the big band on tour there, with Basie at the helm, of course. And Basie was constantly touring. He toured the world several times, always going over to Europe regularly and across the United States and North America. The thing is, as I said earlier, he maintained throughout his whole career, it lasted 49 years, because he founded his big band in 1935, started performing with his big band in 1935, and went on right through to his death in 1984. I believe his last recording was in 1983. It's on the Pablo label and it's called Fancy Pants. And whether you listen to his last recording, Fancy Pants, unless I'm mistaken, there might be another one after that, I'm not sure. But if you listen to that last recording and you listen to his first recordings in the 30s, it's just swinging. It's swinging, swinging, swinging perfection from beginning to end. He was just as good in 1935 and in 1983. There is no difference. He doesn't lose any of his strength. The band doesn't lose anything of its sound. It still performs and swings like mad. And I just finished reading a little book here, written by a French fanatic of jazz. This man here. It's called Dictionnaire amoureux du jazz, which would translate a loving dictionary about jazz or something like that. And it's by Patrice Blanc-Francard, who was a radio personality in France. He was on radio and television for several years, and he wrote this book. He's a jazz fanatic. And there is a chapter in there about his first encounter with the Count Basie Big Band. And I got to share it here with you because I can just imagine the scene. This is 1973, okay? And Count Basie is playing at the New Regent Hotel in downtown New York, not too far from Central Park. And he's playing on the rooftop. Back in those days, there was still some, you were still allowed to go on the rooftops. People were not so often jumping off of them to commit suicide. So anyway, he was playing on the rooftop of the New Regent Hotel, and he was booked for the whole week. Now, one person that did not know that he was booked to play for the week there was Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones. And Mick Jagger in 1973 was celebrating his birthday, his 30th birthday. And he invited, the author of this book I just showed you, had been invited to go there. So he must have had some connections with the Rolling Stones, I don't know. But he had been invited to go to the birthday celebration. And Jagger booked that hotel to celebrate on the rooftop, not knowing that on the rooftop that evening would be the Count Basie Big Band. They were going to take the stage. And they were playing for dancing and for customers of the hotel, of course. But he describes in the book, he says, you should have seen the people slowly gathering there in the evening. It was a whole mixed bag of hippies and heavy rock and rollers and all fans, of course, of the Rolling Stones and rock and roll music and all that. And the people there were just definitely not a jazz clientele. Definitely not a big band clientele or jazz clientele. So he says they didn't know who exactly was coming on the stage at midnight. And he says, sure enough, all the seats were really close to the bandstand. And people started taking their seats around midnight as the band was coming on stage and getting themselves installed and getting ready to play. And he says, man, I recognized immediately, because he was, of course, a jazz fan. I recognized immediately the man sitting at the piano as Count Basie. And probably none of the people in there in attendance knew who the hell that was and what the hell was this they were going to hear. But Basie sat at the piano, and then he counted 4, 3, 2, 1, and the swing machine started playing. And he says, when you're close to a big band like Count Basie with 16 musicians blowing and blasting, man, you're in for a shock. This is real firepower. This is big band firepower. And I know what he's talking about, because you'll actually sit back in your seat. You will stand back when that band starts blasting. So he says the people were just in shock. And they just, I don't know, he says, if they liked it or not. But in any case, they applauded. And he says, I was thoroughly enjoying it because I knew what they were playing. I recognized the tracks they were playing, the tunes they were playing. I recognized a lot of the soloists, a lot of the great jazzmen that were playing with Basie at the time. Because he's always had great soloists. That's one thing. You went to see the big band of Count Basie. Man, he knew how to pick them. He always had great musicians playing in his band. And he always managed everybody that joined the band, even if two musicians left and two new ones came in to fill in the chairs of, say, saxophone, trumpet, or whatever. That's the beautiful thing. The band never lost its sound. It always sounded the same. It always had this beautiful, swinging, easy going, but very, very much full of fire and power. This powerhouse big band swing is how I would describe the sound of the Count Basie Band, the reference band for everybody else. So they never lost anything, no matter who joined the groups. And if you don't know the Count Basie Big Band, well, you have to start listening to some of the output of this man. Now you can start at the early days, the 30s and 40s. Everything's been re-edited on CD, on record, on LPs. You can find it all over the place. This album can be found on LP, but you can get the new CD release. This is the first CD release on Verve. And what happens now with these later CD releases is they find a lot of extra tracks and put a lot of extra tunes on the albums. So this one, or the original album, only has 10 tracks. But if you buy the newly released version of this classic album, you'll probably get, I think it's 6 or 7 or 8 extra tracks on there that were recorded at this same session, but were not put out on the original LP release. That's one of the advantages of buying in compact disc. But nevertheless, this is a good place to start. You want to start your collection of Count Basie. You want to get familiarized with the great work of this big band, this pianist and big band. And as I say, you can't go wrong with Count Basie. You can't pick a really bad album by Count Basie. I don't think he ever made a bad album. It's impossible. It's such greatness, such professionalism, and such consistency. The man could yield nothing but good stuff, you know. And in the 50s, he recorded a lot for Verve. He was with Verve when he did this also. This is live at Newport with Lester Young on the cover. He was still playing with the band on and off back in those days. But then he went on to different other labels during the mid-60s and did a lot of stuff for some European labels, some American labels. And then back in 1972, he finally settled in with the company Pablo, which is the Norman Granz company that Norman Granz, of course, founded Clef Records and then Verve Records. And then when he sold Verve Records to this huge conglomerate, I forget who bought it, but he went on to found another label that's an absolute great classic jazz label that if you don't know this label, if you never listened to anything on this, you should definitely start listening. It's the great Pablo label. And here's Count Basie. Here's one of his albums on Pablo Records. Now, he signed with Pablo in 72, I believe it was, and he stayed with Pablo right until the end, right until his demise in 1984 when he passed away. And his albums on Pablo are fabulous. They are great. You don't want to listen to his early stuff. You want to listen to his later stuff. This is the end of his career. This is the latter part of his career. This is phenomenal. This album right here, Me and You, is one of the great albums he put out during his career. Absolutely fantastic. Beautiful jazz. Beautiful big band jazz. Now, for Pablo, he recorded, I counted about 25 albums, and I'm not sure about the number. There's probably more, but I've counted about 25. I looked on Wikipedia, checked how many there was. They don't put the total amount. They've got a good amount of albums, but they don't have the totality of them, I don't believe. I think they left a few of them out. There's really probably close to 30 albums or something that he did between 1972 and 1984. And as I say, you can't go wrong with these albums either. Now, if I was to recommend just one album, if you were to ask me, give me one album by Basie that you think is absolutely phenomenal and that there's no way I'm going to regret purchasing. Well, I'll tell you, it's a difficult choice because Basie's got such a great output. So many recordings through the years that it's hard to pick one. But if I had to pick one, it would have to be on the Pablo label, which I showed you these later years, and it would be a live recording. Now I can't show you the album because I've got it as a digital download. I purchased this album as a digital download. I used to own it as an LP. It was one of the first Basie LPs I bought back in my LP collecting days. Those are long gone now. even though it's making a comeback, and I know a lot of people like to buy stuff on LP. I don't understand it personally, but well, I understand part of it, but nevertheless, I wouldn't go back to LPs. But hey, that's fine if that's your thing. But I bought this on LP originally back in the 80s, in the early 80s, and it's called Count Basie Live in Montreux 1977. I think the original title is just 77 in Montreux. Count Basie Big Band. Get your hands on that album. First of all, for a live recording, it's wonderfully well recorded. There are 12 tracks on that album. The 12 tracks are absolutely magnificent. They are reference examples of what big band playing should be all about. What beautiful, swinging, powerful, fantastic big band jazz is all about. And every single one of the tracks on that is great. The whole performance is phenomenal. It's Basie at his best, showing that he's still got it 40 some years after he began his career in 1935. And I highly recommend this album, Basie Live in Montreux 1977. You get your hands on that, and I tell you, you will not regret it. Now, after Basie passed away, of course, in 1984, the band continued on, and it was under the leadership at the beginning of Frank Foster, which is a man that also another great saxophonist that passed through the ranks of the Count Basie Orchestra. And Frank Foster led the band, and they made a series of recordings in the late 80s, early 90s. Here's one of them, The Legend, The Legacy, Count Basie Orchestra under the direction of Frank Foster. These albums are good, but the sound, you can tell that slowly but surely the whole Count Basie band, without its leader, is starting to lose its particular, very special sound that it had. It's starting to slowly fade away. And Frank Foster does a great job of leading the band. The band is still very much an excellent big band. But slowly but surely, we're moving away from that particular sound that Basie inflected on this band. I don't know how he did it. It was magic. You know, there he is at the piano, you know. Listen to that. Somehow his presence did something to the rest of the group, to the musicians. And he had them practice, obviously, in a certain way, and probably gave them some pointers on how to do this or do that, which maintained this great consistency of sound all through the years. And after he's gone, after Basie dies, well, that sound, it starts to fade away. And under Frank Foster, it's still a little bit there. He also produced this. This is one of the greats with the great Joe Williams, another musician or singer that Count Basie definitely promoted. He used to call this man his number one son, and started recording with him as early as 1957. That great, legendary classic, Every Day I Have the Blues, with the Count Basie Big Band, with Mr. Williams singing. It's a classic. This is an album he did after Basie's departure, with Frank Foster again, directing the band. It's pretty good. It sounds great. Williams is dynamite, absolute dynamite as usual. One of the greatest jazz singers that ever lived, in case you don't know this man. But overall, I have listened to the last album that the Count Basie Orchestra officially put out in 2018. It's called All About That Basie. And I must say that after listening to that one, the magic is gone. The Basie sound has gone. I could not feel that same kind of light, swinging, particular sound anymore. So my advice to you is definitely don't go with the modern recordings that are being put out. I mean, if you want great big band jazz, yeah, you're going to get great big band jazz if you buy these recent recordings of the Count Basie Orchestra without, of course, Count Basie at the helm. You're still going to get good big band jazz, but you're not going to get that Basie sound. So if you want to get the Basie sound, not the baby sound, but the Basie sound, I highly recommend that you go out and get any of the classic albums that he recorded between the 30s and 1984. especially the Pablo songbook, really, not the songbook, but the Pablo years, if you want, they are not to be neglected. Some of the greatest stuff that he ever did was done for Pablo with his big band. And also, the great thing about Pablo and Norman Granz, he had Basie paired with Oscar Peterson on 2 albums. He plays in a trio quartet format with Oscar Peterson. He also plays with Roy Eldridge. He plays on a duet album, I believe, with Dizzy Gillespie, Basie and Gillespie. Imagine that. I mean, that's phenomenal. I'm not sure if it's a duet or if there's a couple other musicians in the background, but I have that album. It's wonderful. I mean, they had him play with Joe Turner, the great blues shouter. Comes in and plays with the big band and also with some smaller groups. He recorded them in smaller group settings also. He recorded jam sessions at Montreux on top of the live big band recordings at Montreux. They recorded them just about all kinds of different settings with different musicians and different environments. It was really, really wonderful years for Basie because it showed off. It made us look, gave us a more intimate look at the pianist, at Basie the musician, on top of the big band leader. So definitely not to be neglected these years at the Pablo label. They're absolutely wonderful. I highly recommend them. And so this was my little show for today, ranting about the great, legendary, the one and only Count Basie and his orchestra. So if you can, get your hands on some Basie stuff. Get yourself to listening to some really good jazz, because this is just about as good as it gets. I'm the Jazz and Blues Audiophile, and until the next time, this is it. Talk to you later. Have yourself a nice week. Stay safe. Be careful about that virus. It's watching you, man. It's just waiting for you around the corner. That's it. Sayonara.